It gives me a very good opportunity to do an extensive diagnostic assessment of my patients, and I recognize how many people have gone to various places and have not really been clearly diagnosed. The clinical trials approach allows you to do a full assessment, including lab work, EKGs, physical examinations that a lot of patients don't get in a regular psychiatrist's office. The second thing that's very good is it keeps me on the cutting edge. I have to make it my business to know about all the new medications, a lot about brain chemistry, what is the level of action of these drugs, what are the effects and side effects. So it keeps me very academically sharp in doing that. And the third thing is when a drug does get approved, there's a sense of accomplishment that we were part of that process. And either way, whether a drug gets approved or not, knowing that we were involved in that is very, very gratifying.
When you do a clinical trial, it's not just an investigator, it's not just an investigator and a nurse. I mean, what people a lot of times don't realize is the amount of resources that are required in order to do a clinical trial. You have to have, to begin with, a good knowledge of kind of the regulatory base for what it is that we do. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, you actually have to be very focused, and you have to have a staff that's focused on it. So in my case, I have research nurses and study coordinators. The coordinators have a specific protocol, or they have the specific protocol, and they oftentimes know what visits are occurring and what procedures and so forth. They talk with the patients in between visits. They oftentimes are the ones that enter the data into what we call the case report forms for patients. So our charts are not good enough as they are. They actually have to end up then transferred into the pharmaceutical company's format. So your coordinators are really the key to that. The other thing is you have to have a coordinator or a regulatory person that understands the paperwork required by the pharmaceutical companies as well as by the FDA. There are very specific forms that we fill out and have to be updated on a regular basis, and the staff is really key to making sure that you stay on top of that.
My doing clinical research has helped me be a little more sensitive to what my patients may be experiencing and being more sensitive to the various treatment options available. Just as an example, a person with depression, I want to rule out that they don't have another treatable medical condition like low thyroid, which treating that can treat the depression without having to give them additional medications. So the whole process of in-depth diagnostic assessment and differential diagnosis is what I've become more sensitive to. Essentially, my message to most clinicians would be, do it if you can, because that does give you one more option, treatment option for your patients. And I'd also remind them that none of these medications that we use today would be available if previously patients and clinicians had not participated in clinical trials.
It's incredibly rewarding, and at the same time, it's a lot of work. You're part of many times what we would call a multi-site trial. So it's not just my site that's participating in a trial, but there are sites all over the United States, and in many of the trials I do, all over the world. So your data needs to be good to go in with all of the rest of the data, and hopefully then we'll find out if a medication works or not. It's not proving that a medication works, it's finding out, does it work or does it not work, and that's the goal. So think hard about it, be committed to it, and if you're willing to put in the work, it is an incredibly enjoyable experience and incredibly fulfilling.
And so a protocol typically will give you information about the product, safety information as well as preclinical information. They'll also give you information about any other studies that have been done in terms of safety as well as efficacy or effectiveness data. Then they'll have the inclusion-exclusion criteria detailed. Then they'll have the body of the study in terms of how long the study is, what visits, how many visits there will be, what are the procedures and assessments done at each visit, how the medications to be taken, and how communication is maintained between the patient and the site, between the site and the sponsor, between the site and the IRB, between the site and the and any other regulatory authorities. When you're doing clinical research, you're working with the companies to try and meet timelines, meet recruitment timelines, and it's not always easy because some protocols can be very, very difficult. And so finding that right patient, which is very, very important to do. If you don't put the right patient in, you're not getting the best data.
There's oftentimes months of planning that goes into a protocol. So it starts at the pharmaceutical company, and then what they'll do is they'll run it by normally a panel of experts, so what are called key opinion leaders in the field, to provide any feedback on the protocol itself and whether or not it's doable. And then oftentimes they'll contact investigators as well and ask us for our opinion on the protocol. Then, after months of that going on, the protocol finally goes to a review board, normally within the pharmaceutical company, and then it will go to an ethical review board outside of the pharmaceutical company, or what's sometimes called an institutional review board. And that organization will look at it and make sure that the pharmaceutical company is already hoping to make sure that the patient's rights and safety are taken care of, but the ethical or institutional review board is an outside body that also tries to make sure that the patient's rights and safety are taken care of. From there, we as investigators will work with the institutional review board to get a consent form that's appropriate for the patients, and we'll work with the pharmaceutical company to then start up the process. So from the time that we get a consent form to the time that from the time that we get a protocol to the time that the study actually begins can be 3 or 4 months beyond the planning of the protocol itself.